And now the Sunday homily with Deacon José Gutiérrez.
We are celebrating the 26th Sunday in Ordinary Time this Sunday. And we have, as disciples of Jesus Christ, have walked all this long period learning from Him through the Scriptures. And today, the Gospel and the first reading talk about money and earthly possessions. And for me, it's a hard subject to do, especially because I love to talk about evangelization and many other things. But if Jesus taught His disciples about the importance to use well, all this blessing, material possessions, and money, that means it's very important for all of us also. So we must reflect on that. I would like to start with this story. A man died and arrived before the judgment seat of God. The divine judge went through the book of life and did not find the man's name, so he announced to him that his place is in hell. The man protested, "But what did I do? I have done nothing." "Precisely," replied God. "That is why you are going there, because you did nothing." That man could as well be the rich man in today's parable. The parable of the rich man and Lazarus make us wonder why the rich man went to condemnation. He had material possessions and had everything he needed. We are not told that he acquired his wealth by foul means like corruption, extortion, or bribery, and there is no indication that his possessions had been gained by an injustice or evil. We are not told also that he was responsible for the poverty and misery of Lazarus. In fact, we are not even told that Lazarus begged from him and he refused to help. All we are told is that he was feeding and clothing well as any other successful man, a human being, has a right to do. He basically is just living his life and minding his own business. A good life for sure, a life of privilege and comfort, while Lazarus sits outside by himself with no one to care for him. Then there is the big question in the gospel today for us. Why did the rich man go to a place of eternal condemnation, torment, a place of eternal torment? While Lazarus, a Hellenized name from the Hebrew, Eleazar, which means God is my help. While Lazarus was not only materially poor, but also Lazarus represents people who are sad, hungry, thirsty, homeless, disabled, sick, prisoner, weak and powerless, hopeless, confused, with lack of self-confidence, lonely, rejected, depressed, insecure, scared. But despite a life of misfortune and suffering, Lazarus did not lose hope in God. His eyes were set on a treasure stored up for him in heaven, and at the end, he was very rich because he had God in him. As the story says, in the afterlife, the opposite happens. Lazarus ended up enjoying favor in heaven and perfect contentment, and the rich man ended up in a place of endless torment and realizing that his earthly joy has come to an end. This parable is not meant only to console the poor by telling them that their difficulties in this life will be reversed in heaven. And this parable is not telling the poor that being poor is a gate to enter into heaven. Rather, the parable is warning us, is warning also to the rich who turn a blind eye to the plight of the poor. Actually, there is nothing wrong with richness and possessions. For themselves are neither good nor bad, but what we do with them is. There is nothing wrong with being rich. What is wrong is when our riches bind and blind us to the point that we no longer have joy, fulfillment, and meaning in our life. When money becomes our God, then people become our tools to make money, and the true God, the triune God, has no place in our hearts. In the gospel today, Jesus does not teach us that owning wealth is bad, so we have to disregard it. God creates wealth. Therefore, this is good. God is just so merciful to us that He trusts those who have plenty of wealth to help uplift the situation of the poor. Let's come back to the question. What is the sin of the rich man then? What is the sin? The sin of the rich man was that he never noticed Lazarus. So it's not a stretch to say that the only thing the rich man is probably guilty of is not noticing the man, not paying attention, maybe not even realizing the suffering of a man just outside his door. The rich man could not see beyond his material treasure. I guess you could say that to the rich man, Lazarus was invisible. He did no wrong, but he did nothing. When we think about sin, we often think that we sin only by thought, word, and deed. We forget a fourth and very important way through which we sin, namely by omission. In the I confess, we say these words: I have sinned through my own fault, in my thoughts, in my words, in what I have done, and in what I have failed to do. In the Catholic teaching, that is the sin of omission, or not doing what one is supposed to do. We too easily excuse sins of omission by claiming that we don't do anything wrong. That's the problem with us. We don't do anything. And so, if we want to be faithful, if we want to please God, if we want to live life in imitation of Christ, then we must open our eyes and pay attention to the invisible people right in our midst, the ones who are hurting dearly and for whom no one seems to care. And there is many Lazarus living in our neighborhoods. There is many around us. We just need to open our eyes and see. When I was serving in North Portland, I was recently serving there. I didn't know the neighborhood. I was hungry. And I went to look for my lunch. And I bought my lunch. And I saw this little park there. And I said, oh, that looks like a nice spot to eat. And I sat down and start eating. And while I was eating, I opened my eyes and see something in which I was amazed. The park was full of people, homeless people, people with probably were mentally ill, people probably who were fighting addictions. I knew that they were sleeping there because I saw their campers and their car full of things that homeless people most of the time carry with them. And was open my eyes and I was looking at that. And then I see this man walking he passed by the walkway and I look, and then all of a sudden he was walking, and then he dropped in his knees and raise his arm and start praying, Lord, Lord, help me, please don't forget me. And he start crying, shouting out, please God, help me. At that moment, I saw that man, and to my mind came, this was a child once. He had a family. Was a young man with dreams and hopes. And for whatever reason in his life, he ended up like that. And I didn't see a man who was troubled, but I saw a son of God hurting. And I cried. And I felt so powerless in that moment. And I felt sad that I see so much need. And no one is looking. No one is doing anything. But at the same time, I say a prayer and I say, Lord, just give me strength to keep doing what I'm doing. I know one day we will create change. I know one day, as many of us keep working and doing our work, we will see this city change. And we will see hope in this world. That's my hope. That's my dream. And I hope I won't die to see that we have created change. That's the story for us today, this Sunday. Who might these people be for us? Maybe it's the widow neighbor who is terribly lonely. Maybe it's a co-worker who feels he or she doesn't really fit in and who often gets excluded from social activities. Maybe it's a spouse who needs nothing more than to feel wanted, desired, respected, and appreciated. Maybe it's a child who feels his or her parents play favors. Maybe it's an elderly parent who is placed in a home and rarely visited. Maybe it's a friend who's going through a divorce and needs someone to lend a compassionate, non-judgmental ear. Or maybe it's a whole group of people. Any minority or marginalized group that struggles simply to be treated with the same respect and have the same opportunities as people in the majority. In closing, I like to say that the good news of this parable is divided in two parts. One. If you feel like Lazarus right now, afflicted by sickness, poverty, and pain, forgotten by society and by those whom God has blessed in this life, please don't give up. Continue believing and trusting in God, firm in the belief that our God is a loving and merciful God. And second, if you see yourself as one of those blessed by God with the good things of life, open your door and see. Probably there is a Lazarus lying at your gate and you have not taken notice. Who are our Lazarus? Who are invisible to us? And just as importantly, what each of us is going to do about it.